What's up guys, Ben Melican here back for Carl's Mystery Tackle Box. You know, it's no secret that in the fall, the water cools down, the shad make a big migration back to the backs of the creeks like you got right here, back behind me. And of course, if the shad, the bait fish, are moving back their shallow, the big old slaunchy, nasty bass are gonna be following very closely behind, or they're gonna be ahead of them, waiting for them to pick them off. So in today's video, that's what we're gonna talk about and how to approach those areas. I'm gonna show you guys my favorite 3 baits. These guys right here, different approaches and different types of habitat to fish when the bass make the big transition back to the back of the creeks with the shad. You're not gonna wanna miss this one. The very first bait I like to throw, the most aggressive bait, and the one I like to throw when I want to cover the most possible water to find fish, is this guy right here, a lipless crankbait. Now, lipless crankbaits are a really good bait to throw in the spring, of course, you know, around grass flats, rip them out of the grass to get that reaction strike. Well, I fish them a little bit differently in the fall, but it's the same type of areas I'm throwing them in. You know, I'm throwing them wherever I find flats, you know, big, wide, sprawling flats as the bass move back into those creeks. Now, this flat might be towards the mouth of the creek on a big flat point. It might be all the way in the very back of the creek where, you know, there's a winding creek channel going in or something like that. But regardless, flats hold bass this time of year, and a lipless crankbait it's a way to cover a ton of water and catch the most active fish in that area. So I already mentioned, you know, channel swings and creek channels and stuff like that, and that is absolutely huge, especially in a natural lake, natural reservoir, a river system lake, anything like that. You need to follow that creek channel back into the back of those creeks, because that's the highway those bass are going to use to get back there. So with all these baits and all these different techniques, these 3 I'm going to show you today, a creek channel is extremely important. You know, points are always important too, of course, but in my opinion, in the fall, you want to follow that creek channel and have a very good idea of where that's at, where it swings up against the bank, and most importantly, just where it swings and where it's at as it gets to the back of the creek. Because a lot of times you'll be throwing this lipless crankbait up in 1.5, 2 feet of water, and that's where those bass will be. And if they're not there, you're throwing there and you're dragging it right to the edge of the creek channel, and a lot of times those bass will position themselves right on the edge of that little break right there, and they'll just crush this lipless crankbait when it comes by them. Also need to keep in mind when you're throwing this lipless bait, wind is your friend. You know, not quite as much with the last 2 techniques I'm going to show you guys, but you want to be throwing this lipless bait up around any type of windy bank. That'll push those fish out of that creek channel, into the deep stuff. It's a little bit harder to target them a lot of times, but when it's windy, those fish get up, they feed, the shad get pushed around, and the bass have a huge advantage over the shad, especially when that water's getting stirred up and a little bit more muddy. So whenever you can find wind pushing up on a flat, that especially is a sweet spot to throw lipless crank. All right, so the second part of my 3-prong approach to catch bass as they're picking off those shad, they're following them back into the back of the creeks, is a method that I catch some of my better fish on. It's a little bit more predictable than just chasing around the wind and balls of bait, and that is flipping a creature bait like this guy right here into stuff like what we got back behind us right here. We got isolated man-made brush piles, and it works equally as well on docks. You know, anytime you can find a dock that's maybe closer to the back of the creek, but really it can be anywhere in a creek, any type of area where it's dissected by wherever those bass are migrating and the shad are migrating back into the creek. But the more isolated, the better. You want that dock to be, you don't want to be fishing a creek with 50 different docks that are all next to each other. Sure, there'll be fish on some of them once in a while, but if you can find that one dock or that one isolated brush pile, those are absolutely key friggin' areas. Now, when I do get to an isolated brush pile, an isolated dock, stuff like that, to flip with this beaver style bait, I want to make some really good, thorough presentations. You know, you're going to be flipping it in there, obviously, and a lot of the fish are going to eat it on the fall, but you want to make a lot of different presentations, because a lot of times those bass see shad come by all different times of the day, and they're seeing that natural bait, the real thing, you know, come by their faces all day, every day for weeks and even months at a time when they're on this little big shad fall migration pattern. So they get really dialed into eating the exact bait, the exact shad that are coming by. So since they're used to seeing the real thing so much, you have to have your bait right in front of that fish's face a lot of times, and you have to have the right angle. So multiple angles, multiple flips of different pieces of cover, different dock posts, different limbs on a tree, whatever, is absolutely extremely important. Now, one other thing I'll share with you guys too, if you're not catching them on this flipping bait, on this beaver, one great thing to do is downsize and go super natural. I oftentimes like to throw a drop shot, a little tiny shaky head, a Ned rig, something like that. Those can be equally as effective even when they're in that super thick cover, because those fish see a lot of baits and they see a lot of the real thing. So the third part of my three-prong approach for following these bass to the back of the creeks is with a squared bill crankbait. You guys know I love to throw crankbaits, and this is one of my favorite times of the year to throw the baits. And where we're gonna throw them is what we got right back here behind us, and that is riprap, rock, stuff like that. Obviously this is not a natural lake because of all this man-made riprap. Holds fish really well, but this works equally as well on natural lakes as well, where you got creek channel swings, you got natural rock and stuff like that. And so what I'm looking for is areas that are just like this. We're at the very back of a creek and they've built this little rock pond dam type deal. And the same thing goes for lakes where they have a big road intersecting. So we got a road back behind us and then maybe there'll be a bridge. But the bass will actually use those areas because the shad will be moving back. The shad will hit that back area and they'll kind of congregate back there. So a lot of times that's where you're going to see the biggest population of shad. And of course bass will love to hide in riprap to I don't know, pop out, eat whatever shad they possibly can. So let me show you guys how I like to fish areas like this. So the great thing about fishing these areas with the man-made riprap is a lot of times you can fish them from the bank or with a boat. Obviously I'm on a boat today, and the main key for this is what you're seeing back behind me. You can't be a princess about banging your boat into some rocks once in a while. It's gonna happen. That's why they put rub rails on them. You know, stop trying to make your boat stay pretty, because you need to get in tight. You gotta be right on that bank. If you're making casts straight to the bank from over here, a perpendicular angle, you're not gonna catch anything. If you guys wanna not catch anything, then that's a good idea. If you wanna actually come up and catch some fish though, get up parallel. You're gonna fish that bait in the strike zone the entire way back throughout the cast. And I've told you guys so many times that bait needs to be making contact with as many rocks as possible. Bang that thing around on the rocks. Those bass are gonna be nice and congregated in there. They're gonna be following those shad. And the great thing about the square bill banging around down there, a lot of times when those fish have seen so many of the real thing and they get so dialed into those natural shad, you know, they're seeing giant groups of them all the time, and it's almost gets to the point where it's impossible to throw something that they'll eat. The square bill crankbait is banging around enough, it's erratic enough that those fish are gonna just eat it out of instinct. They're gonna have a reaction strike to it, even when they don't wanna eat, or when they're full, or when they're so used to seeing something real, they're absolutely gonna munch this bait. That's all I got for you guys today. You know, hopefully you can use this three-prong approach to get out and catch some fish as they move back to the back of creeks and chase the shad around this fall. Don't forget, start out on the big flats and stuff when there's wind blowing up on them. Throw that lipless crankbait. As the fish move back, you find some isolated docks, brush piles, stuff like that. Flip a creature bait, a beaver or a jig, whatever around. And when you get to the very back of the creeks, bang this little squared bill up against those ripping rocks. And yeah, you're gonna have a hard time not finding some, if not catching a whole bunch doing that throughout that process. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Catch you soon. I'm out of here.